I unearthed 8 terrifying airport horror stories that will keep you up at night. I never should have opened that door. It felt wrong. A chilling sense of dread pressed down on me, a weight I couldn't shake. I was just a regular traveler, carrying a backpack filled with ordinary things, headphones, a paperback, snacks. But that day, the airport felt different. The usual buzz was replaced with an unsettling silence, shadows sneaking into the corners of my vision. The fluorescent lights flickered, casting strange shapes on the tile floor. I could hear whispers. Were they coming from the walls? No, just tired travelers speaking in hushed tones. The air was cold, too cold, like winter had seeped into the terminal. As I walked through, I could taste metal on my tongue, a sharp tang that sent shivers down my spine. The smell of overcooked fries mixed with something else, something darker. Then, I heard Ida's shuffling sound, soft at first. I paused, heart pounding. Was someone behind me? I turned, but nobody was there. Just a lone janitor pushing a cart, his face hidden beneath a worn cap. He mumbled to himself, and I couldn't help but feel he was warning me of something. I shook off the feeling, forced a smile, but deep down, unease settled in my stomach like a stone. A sudden crash made me jump. A suitcase, heavy and worn, had toppled over. No one seemed to notice. I stepped closer, compelled. Was there something in it? The zipper strained under the pressure, as if something alive was inside, trying to escape. I nearly reached for it when a shadow passed over me. I whipped around, and the janitor was gone, replaced by a figure all dressed in black, blending seamlessly with the dim corners of the airport. Just a trick of the light? I could hardly breathe. Then came the whispers again, louder this time, circling me like a storm. Leave before it's too late. My skin prickled. I turned to run, but I felt a cold hand brush my shoulder. I froze, muscles tight. I didn't dare look back. Instead, I bolted towards the nearest gate. The crowd was thicker now, yet it felt like no one was truly there. Just shells, watching, waiting. Suddenly, a door slammed shut behind me. The noise sliced through the air, sharp and final. I spun around. The figure loomed in the distance, its outline flickering like a bad connection. My chest tightened. This was no ordinary airport. In the grip of panic, I gasped for air, heart racing. I couldn't know what was waiting for me behind that door. But I had to find out. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button. It really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. I stepped into the gaunt, peculiar realm behind the door, swallowed by the silence that had followed me like a specter. The transition was like breaching the surface of a frigid lake, the shock of icy air bruising my skin. At once, the artificial hum of the airport was replaced by an oppressive quiet, thick and stifling. The hallway stretched before me, an elongated corridor lit by dim, flickering lights that cast shadows skittering across the cracked walls. I felt my heart thud heavily in my chest, a primal instinct telling me to turn back. Yet the urgency to explore churned within me, a dark curiosity dragging me deeper into the unknown. As I ventured further, the temperature plummeted even more, and I saw my breath manifest, swirling before me like specters in the fog. Memories of fleeting whispers drifted through my mind, urging me to escape, but I pressed on. The corridor twisted unexpectedly, leading me to a doorway marked only by a rusted sign reading baggage claim A. There should have been a sense of urgency, passengers arriving, luggage spilling out, but the room was empty. The high ceilings groaned under the weight of tired fluorescent tubes, their sickly flickers reminding me of dying stars. The air was laced with an unsettling stillness, as if the room held its breath. That I stepped inside, eyes scanning for movement, heart pounding, a warning that felt simultaneous with the cries of my instincts. My boots echoed against the pristine floor, contrasting against the silence. Plastered against the walls were old photographs, grinning faces frozen in time, clutching luggage, boarding planes. Some images were smudged, others marred by water stains, The once vibrant colors leached into a dull, ghostly palette. They stared out, as if pleading for release from their frozen plight, but as I examined them, a faint rustling noise pierced the quiet, echoing like distant thunder. I turned sharply, expecting to find someone standing behind me, but the room remained empty. No voice, no presence, just me and the lingering sense of dread that crept in like a shroud. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I noticed movement near the baggage carousel. A suitcase, seemingly just materialized from thin air, began to revolve ominously on its own, the worn leather battered and historical. It was unassuming yet wholly wrong, like the hollow echo of laughter that vanished at the stroke of midnight. Driven by an impulse I couldn't explain, I approached it, drawn closer by an invisible force. With a trembling hand, I reached for the suitcase, feeling a wave of sudden dread crashing over me. It was unnaturally heavy, its presence demanding attention. My fingers brushed against the zipper, where a pervasive darkness seemed to belch from within. I unzipped it slowly, not knowing what I would unleash. The metal teeth of the zipper caught against the fabric with a shrill rasp, revealing shadowed contents that writhed like something alive. The cacophony erupted around my pained cries, whispers of anguish mixing with the thrumming of my racing heart. I stumbled back, the suitcase spilling onto the ground, its contents flaring before me like smoke from a dying flame. It was filled with faded memories, torn photographs, dismembered toys, and letters that crumbled at the edges, revealing the truth of despair. Each piece seemed to throb with a past long buried, one of loss and longing that beckoned for recognition. A lone figure emerged from the shadowed depths of the room. An icy chill punctured the warm air, coiling around my spine. The presence was familiar yet grotesque, a contorted mimicry of the travelers in the photographs, too real to be an illusion. Eyes like cold-cut glass stared directly at me, filled with something akin to hunger. "Why did you come here?" It rasped, its voice like gravel scraping against bone. Before I could respond, the floor beneath me trembled, vibrating with a deep resonance that crept into my bones. The whispers crescendoed into a horrifying scream, a wail that threatened to unravel sanity. I turned to flee, but the suitcase, inexplicably, defied gravity, rising slowly into the air. It hung ominously in the doorway, blocking my only chance of escape, pulsating with a rhythm that echoed the frantic beat of my heart. I realized too late a dark truth weighed upon me, the kind that churned inside empty hearts. I wasn't meant to leave. With panic surging, I lunged toward the exit, the world around me darkening, the walls closing in as shadows unfurled like tendrils ready to ensnare me. Just as I reached the threshold, the suitcase fell, slamming to the ground with an ear-splitting crash. And in that instant, darkness spilled forth, enveloping me in an all-consuming void, and the last thing I heard was the shriek of sorrow echoing through the halls. Then, there was silence. I stood suspended in that inky expanse, suspended between the remnants of my reality and the encroaching shadows that threatened to engulf me. The silence was a weight that pressed down, expansive yet claustrophobic, as though the air itself had thickened into a tangible nightmare. My heartbeat echoed in my ears, a pulse of panic that quickened, demanding clarity in the chaos that surrounded me. Suddenly, the silence fractured. It splintered and splashed against the walls, birthing low murmurs that liltingly slithered through the void. They were not mere whispers. They spoke my name, weaving it through desperate pleas and taunts that tugged at memories I had long suppressed. It felt intimate, familiar, like a lover calling out from the beyond, seducing me into a web of terror and longing. Then, I felt a prickling sensation creeping down my spine, accompanied by the soft rustle of fabric brushing against my side. I turned slowly, the darkness swirling like smoke as the specter of my past materialized before me. It wore a tattered version of my favorite jacket, the buttons glinting like eyes in the shadows. Its face was a distortion, a reflection of me that had been twisted by despair and forgotten like the photographs on the wall. "Why did you leave me?" The figure whispered, a voice reminiscent of my own, yet drenched in a sorrow that was not mine alone. "You abandoned us." I stumbled back, scrambling to comprehend the horror that stood before me. My memories flooded my senses, the echoes of laughter and the warmth of affection mingling with the chill of despair. There were faces, beloved faces, twisted by grief, flickering into existence and then fading into the void. Shadows of family, friends whom I had betrayed by forgetting. Their eyes were hollow, sunken into a sorrow that pierced my very existence. "Help us," they chorused, a fragmented choir of my life playing out in agonizing harmony. The voices wrapped around me, binding me to their pain, while the darkness clung like a shroud, damp and suffocating. "You cannot leave, you must remember." Fueled by desperation, I forced myself to move, lunging into the thick shadows behind me. My feet carried me through the suffocating darkness. I could no longer see the boundaries of the room. The walls had disappeared, leaving me adrift in an ocean of despair. My frantic movements sent haunting figures swirling around me like specters in a cyclone. There came flashes of memories, their smiles turning to masks of horror, mouths opening wide in eternal screams of agony. Just as the darkness began to crystallize, coalescing into grotesque forms that danced with the shadows, the suitcase exploded open in a rancorous exchange, revealing a torrential cascade of objects soaked in memories I wished to forget. Children's toys from birthdays that never came, canceled flights that told stories of lives untraveled, and crumpled tickets to places now veiled in hushed regrets. A cacophony of echoes that seemed to breathe, whispering tales of lives intertwined with my own, gently pulling me deeper into their lament. "Relinquish your heart," the specter whispered, moving closer, wrenching the jacket tighter around its frame. "Let us be whole again or perish among our fragments." Panic clawed at my throat. I swiped at the air between us, gasping for breath. "No, I won't let you," but before the plea could escape, the ground shuddered once more, and the shadows surged, curling around my limbs. Each gasp of my breath felt heavier than the last, laden with regret. A fissure opened in the floor, revealing a chasm, a gaping maw echoing with the cries of those I had lost, the souls trapped in sorrow, forever searching for release. That I fought against the binding darkness, yearning for light, for escape, when the shadows surged forth as a tidal wave, pulling me with intoxicating force toward that abyss. I felt weightlessness, the sensation of being drawn into the eternal night, when suddenly a freezing hand clutched my ankle, an anchor that threatened to pull me down with it. The world above continued to crumble, the last flickers of fluorescent light swam into oblivion. As I peered down into the gaping pit, grasping desperately at the last remnants of solid ground, I saw a face rising from the depths, a familiar face, one I thought I'd never see again. It twisted together, a culmination of love and loss, ethereal yet irrevocably real. "Help me," it gasped, echoing the sentiments of the others, but this voice belonged to someone whose name rattled like a pendant in my heart. "Don't let this be our end." And just like that, the shadows bore down, plunging me into the gaping maw where screams and cries implored me to make a choice. The hands gripped tighter, dragging me within as I fought against the pulsating dark. My mind tore apart at the seams, splintering under the weight of decision as the world shifted. And there, in that infinite darkness, I prepared to be claimed. In that moment, I understood I was never alone. And then, like a frayed rope fraying further, I felt the last vestiges of my will disconnect, and as I plunged into the madness that awaited, a voice broke through the cacophony, so clear and certain it sent ice racing up my spine. "Welcome aboard, dear traveler." With that, the ground beneath me dissolved, and I plunged into the darkness, a sinking sensation wrapping around me as the echo of laughter rang in my ears. I awoke, gasping, on a cold metal gurney, the air thick with an antiseptic scent that clawed at my throat. My eyes fluttered open to harsh fluorescent lights that buzzed above, casting a sickly pallor over my surroundings. I felt disoriented, every muscle in my body protesting against the frigid metal beneath me. For a brief moment, all that existed was the rhythmic beeping of machines echoing in the stark room, eerie in its mechanical precision. As I sat up, the haze of confusion cleared just enough for dreadful clarity to seep in. I scanned the stark, sterile environment. The walls were pale, adorned with outdated medical charts yellowed by time, and the floors were too clean, a sterile shine that felt hostile. Shadows flickered in the corners of my sight, figures moving just beyond the reach of the light. I shivered, a familiar sense of dread wrapped around my chest, as if something unseen was watching me, waiting for the right moment to pounce. "Where am I?" I croaked, my voice trembling in the blank void. The answer came from the corner of the room, a figure slouched in a chair, draped in shadows. "You're safe here for now." The voice rasped like dry leaves rustling across concrete. Yet there was an unsettling familiarity to it that sent chills down my spine. "What happened?" I gripped the edge of the gurney, feeling the sharp bite of metal. I recalled the darkness, the dread, and the familiar face drifting away. I wasn't alone. You were never alone. The figure interjected, rising slowly, the shadows swirling around them like a shroud. As they stepped into the light, their features sharpened. The face carved from my own memories, a grotesque reflection twisted and warped, eyes sunken deep into their sockets, mouth twisted into a mocking grin. "But you abandoned them. Did you think they'd let you go so easily?" The breath caught in my throat as I recoiled from the twisted semblance of myself. "You how? Why are you doing this? They need you," it hissed, advancing with slow, deliberate steps. "They are trapped because of you. They came for you, longing for your touch, for your love. But you cast them aside. Their heartbreak clings to you like a malignant shadow." As the figure drew closer, I caught the scent of decay wafting towards me, a putrid reminder of what lay beneath. I fought the urge to turn away, my heart hammering like a drum in the silence that filled the room, punctuated only by that relentless beeping. "Help them," it urged, reaching out with a skeletal hand that seemed to stretch across the void between us. "Embrace your past. Relinquish your heart. I can't. I want," I screamed, feeling the mounting pressure of their gaze, suffocating. In a moment of sheer impulse, I swung my legs off the gurney and stumbled backward, my back colliding with the cold wall. The moment the impact sent shockwaves through me, I felt a jolt of connection like electricity igniting the air. The machines surged louder, their ominous beeps spiraling into frantic urgency. Suddenly the room began to tremble, shadows flickering violently as if in response to a rising storm. "They're calling you." The figure shrieked, hands curling into claws, extending towards me with an insatiable hunger. "Don't you hear them? Don't you feel their agony? You must choose." A scream erupted from the second figure, a wretched soul that darted through the doorway, one fraction of a face I recognized, an anguished expression frozen in time, lost and yearning. My heart thudded wildly, trapped between despair and hope. Before I could process the meaning behind it, the air exploded in a cacophony of moaning voices. They surged through the walls, creeping like smoke into the room, their cries rolling forth with grief and longing, a torrential downpour of sorrow that rattled the very foundation of my mind. "Take their hands. Save them." The figure screeched, the shadows darting wildly across the walls as if in response to their torment. "Or perish among the echoes of your failure." Just then, a sudden blackout and engulfing darkness swallowing the fluorescent lights, plunging everything into an oppressive void. I felt the air shift around me, the whispers growing louder. I shut my eyes tight, holding back fear, desperately trying to remember the faces of those I lost, their laughter submerged by the haunting dirge surrounding me. But before I could summon the courage to step forward, the wall behind me crumbled away like dust. A grotesque visage of a chilled face of innocence twisted in grief emerged from the darkness, arms outstretched, their mouth moving, but no words came forth. Only a haunting wail pierced the heavy air, clenching around my heart. Through the cacophony, I felt the icy grip of something pulling at me from the depths of the shadows. My back hit the jagged edge of the gaping void where walls had once stood, the whispers intensifying as if urging me to leap into the abyss. "Help us," the child's ghost implored, their hollow gaze boring into my soul, as I braced myself against the encroaching storm of wailing sorrow. Just as the fraying thread holding me lodged fractured, my foot slipped over the edge, plunging into nothing but uncertainty. I braced for the fall, the desperate cries fading into a deafening silence, leaving only one chilling echo lingering in the shadows. "Welcome to your end." And then I fell, wrenching air engulfing me as I spiraled into the abyss. I tumbled for what felt like an eternity, weightless and unmoored, surrounded by a void that pulsed with insidious energy. In the distance, pinpricks of light flickered like dying stars, tantalizing yet far enough to seem unreachable. The silence enveloped me, a thick shroud, pressing against my ears, suffocating. Then, without warning, a jagged edge tore through the air, and I landed with a bone-jarring thud on a cold, damp surface. Groans erupted from below, sharing the echoes of pain that rang like church bells in an abandoned cathedral. Gasping, I attempted to orient myself, my lungs fighting against the cloying odor of mildew and rot. I lay in a cavernous room, enshrined in a putrid darkness that seemed alive, writhing with whispers. Tendrils of shadow wove around the walls and the ground, disorienting me as I struggled to rise. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth, accompanied by some unidentifiable metallic tang, a heady blend that made my stomach churn. As my eyes adjusted, ghostly silhouettes drifted around the periphery, their forms flickering like dying flames. I blinked, dread creeping in as familiar faces emerged from the Shadowsa cluster of tortured souls bound by a sorrow that emanated all around us. Their eyes mirrored the abyss from which I had just fallen, hollow and pleading. "Help us," they chorused, their voices distorted, echoing through the cavernous gloom. "We are lost, abandoned just like you." I staggered to my feet, heart racing as realization clawed at my chest. The figure from before, that warped reflection, was this the fate that awaited me? Stranded between the realm of the living and the dead? My chest tightened, breath catching in my throat. "Please, we need you," a voice cried, resonating with anguish that struck a chord within me. I turned, and there, swathed in darkness, was another familiar face, an old friend, a part of my life I thought I had buried long ago. "Is that really you?" I whispered, disbelief and desperation churning in my gut. They nodded, yet the movement only deepened the shadows that clung to their form. "Remember us, remember what you did," they urged, fear thickening the air. "It's your fault we're here. You have to finish what you started." "Finish what? What are you talking about?" My voice cracked under the weight of burgeoning dread, the memories clawing their way back like a tide of anguish ready to drown me. My past crimes haunted me, specters mocking my failures. I could feel the first wisps of panic rising in my throat. "Release us," they shrieked, their faces shifting through sorrow and anger, mouths moving that produced no sound but the echoing cries of the forgotten. "You are the only one who can." With a sudden movement, the darkness pressed in, a wave of despair crashing heavily upon me. The ground trembled, and the walls of the cavern inched closer together as the shadows swirled faster. Cries transformed into a cacophony of rage, the anguished wails slicing through the air like shards of glass. "Join us. Embrace the darkness." The voices howled, a chorus torn from the depths of human suffering, drowning out the sanity that clung desperately to my mind. Each face twisted in pain, urging me forward into their realm, pulling at my very essence. That I stumbled back, my muscles tensing as I scanned for an exit, but there was none. Just the fluttering shadows and eyes filled with desperate hope. "I can't. I won't give in," I shouted defiantly, but my resolve wavered like a candle in a raging storm. Then, with a thunderous roar, the ground beneath me shattered, chunks of earth falling away into a fathomless darkness, exposing a chasm of swirling torment. I gripped the nearest ledge desperately, my heart racing in my chest as I felt the abyss beckoning again, the shadows pulsating with a malevolent hunger. "Save us," they repeated, voices rising in a fevered pitch, the cavern vibrating with their cries. "You must choose us or them." Choose. In that moment, I understood I had to confront the horror that surrounded me, the souls that ached for release, or be consumed by my own guilt. The weight of their despair pressed down on me, relentless in its grip. The shadows rippled like a dark tide, and suddenly, I was teetering on the edge of that chasm, clinging tightly to the fear that threatened to swallow me whole. With tremors coursing through me, I closed my eyes, readying myself for the leap into the enigma that awaited. But as I plunged forward, a hand shot out, grabbing my wrist with a vice-like grip. Not yet. I opened my eyes to see the twisted reflection of my past grinning back at me, and all at once, the darkness enveloped us both. "Welcome to your end," it whispered, as a blinding flash consumed everything around me. Then, I fell once more. As I fell into the blinding light, the sensation of weightlessness engulfed me once again, but the warmth quickly morphed into a biting chill that sliced through my skin. I drifted, suspended in an endless expanse of space, fragmented memories swirling around me like sharp pieces of glass, ready to pierce through the fabric of my sanity. Then, with a sudden jolt, I hit something solid, slamming against a cold, unforgiving floor. Wincing, I opened my eyes, but the surroundings were shrouded in an unsettling fog that clung to the ground like a predator. Disoriented, I pushed myself up, heart racing. It was a vast terminal, eerily silent, save for the distant sound of echoing footsteps that reverberated off the walls, distant, yet too near to ignore. The fluorescent lights overhead flickered sporadically, casting erratic shadows where the fog thickened. I glanced around wildly, trying to place myself. Rows of empty chairs lined the terminal, their metallic surfaces glistening with condensation, resembling tombstones in a forsaken graveyard. A sense of dread swelled within me as I navigated the ghostly landscape, ears straining to catch the faintest sound. Then I saw them, figures huddled in the shadows, faces obscured beneath layer upon layer of grime and despair. Their eyes glimmered like embers, glowing in the dimness, filled with a haunting mixture of longing and fear. They reached out their hands towards me, mouths moving in silent pleas. Help us, help us, the desperate whispers slithered through the air, entwining around my consciousness, pulling me closer towards the seat that felt more like a throne of torment than a passage to safety. That I hesitated, feeling their cold breath brushing against my skin like a lover's caress gone wrong. What would happen here? I stuttered, desperation clawing its way out of my throat. A voice erupted from the shadows, deeper and more guttural, cutting through the cacophony of whispers. It was you, wasn't it? It was the twisted reflection of my past. You led them here. Lied. I didn't, but before I could protest, the terminal trembled as though racked with a collective shudder. The walls pulsed, distorting like a living creature, breathing in time with the wailing souls gathered in the corners. Join us, join them. Only then can we go, they cried, desperation morphing into enraged demands. The ground lurched, and I fought to maintain my balance, dread pooling in the pit of my stomach. No, I bellowed, finding my voice amid the chaos. Yet even as I spoke, a new terror crept in, an insidious presence materializing from the fog. It emerged, a figure cloaked in shadows, its form shifting and undulating, an echo of all the despair that haunted this wretched place. The face was obscured, a darkness swirling where flesh should be, and yet I could feel its piercing gaze, boring into me like a needle. Your guilt is palpable, it hissed, a sibilant whisper that twisted around my mind. You cannot escape. They will never let you. Suddenly, the air thickened, charged with malevolence. The figures, once distant, surged toward me, a tide of lost souls that swelled into a frantic mob, their voices swirling, a cacophony of anguish and regret. You left us. You turned away. They crashed into me, a wave of icy despair that threatened to drown me, blinding my senses. Get away, I screamed, pushing against the writhing mass, panic rendering me frantic. The darkness coiled around me, an inescapable grasp tightening, squeezing the breath from my lungs. In that moment of desperation, I glimpsed something in the distance, a shimmer of light piercing the oppressive fog. Hope ignited a fire within me, a primal urge to escape this nightmare. I just need to reach that light, I thought, and with newfound determination, I surged forward. But as I fought against the dark tide, the shadowy figure let out a horrific laugh, deep and haunting, and I felt the desperation of the souls choking me. You can run, but you can never shake what you've done. The past will always find you. Fueled by fear and determination, I pushed through the throng, the spectral figures clawing at me, pulling my clothes, my skin, their fingers icy against my flesh. I was nearly there, the light flickering tantalizingly close. I could hear the cries of my past echoing behind me, a tempest of voices drowning in unrelenting grief. But just as I reached out towards the glow, a sudden weight crushed me back into the depths like a stone dropped in water. Finish what you started. The dark figure enveloped me once again, laughing as the world around me bled into chaos. I thrashed against the weight, terror surging through me as the spectral hands pulled at my soul. And then I fell into darkness once more. I woke again, gasping for breath. The ephemeral glow faded away, replaced by a heavy blackness that pressed down on me, suffocating. I lay still, racked by confusion and despair. Was this a dream? A nightmare wrapped in layers of anguish meant to consume me? As the disorientation lifted, I sensed movement around me. The oppressive silence was broken by guttural breaths, raspy and hoarse, as if something invisible hovered just out of view. Gathering my resolve, I pushed myself upright, but my limbs felt so heavy, as if they had been soaked in lead that I focused on my surroundings, realizing I was no longer in the terminal, but instead in a cramped, dimly lit room that stank of decay and forgotten memories. The walls were peeling, and the faint light from an unshaded bulb overhead flickered rhythmically, casting long shadows that twisted and morphed as if they had minds of their own. All around me were reminders of a life once lived. Discarded luggage, an old newspaper yellowing in the corner with headlines that felt hauntingly familiar. Faces from the faded photographs stared back, eyes wide with a mixture of fear and disbelief. Each face tugged at a deeply buried memory, tracing lines of connection back to moments I wished to forget. Suddenly, the door creaked open, revealing a figure shrouded in darkness, an apparition too familiar to ignore. It was me, or rather a grotesque reflection of my former self, hollow-eyed and gaunt. It beckoned me forward, its fingers outstretched, long and skeletal, draped in shadows as if they were rags of despair. "I've been waiting," it intoned, the voice echoing around the small space, reverberating in my very bones. "We need to finish our business." Desperation clawed at my throat. "What do you want from me? Who are you? Who am I?" "I am your guilt made flesh," it hissed, the surroundings trembling in response. "You've tried to run, to hide from the truth, but the echoes of your past will always find a way back. They suffer because of you. They cannot move on until you acknowledge them." The walls pulsed, drawing closer, tightening around me. I staggered backward, but the shadow version of myself advanced, eyes like black holes pulling at my fragmented soul. "Face what you buried, confront your mistakes." "No," I cried, but my voice felt weak, swallowed by the weight of the past pressing in on me. Panic escalated as the air thickened with a shroud of heavy regret. Suddenly, the ground quaked beneath me, and a horrible cacophony filled the air, a mix of anguished cries echoing through the walls. They whirled around us in a cyclone of grief, faces morphing into horrific visages, each accusing me with their silent screams. "You let us die," they chorused, a chilling harmony that resonated in my chest, a ghostly assault that immobilized me with terror. "You turned your back." I fell to my knees, clutching my head as the phantom voices clawed deeper into my psyche. They grew louder, their sorrow wrapping around me like a vice. "No, I didn't mean to. I didn't know better. You had a choice," the grotesque version of myself roared, the shadows flickering with a violent intensity. "Your cowardice cost lives. We will not forgive." The room swirled, the dark figure's twisted face glaring down at me. I remembered the fateful day, the moment I had chosen to abandon them, to leave them in that cursed place. But I had to survive, and now I was drowning in the very tides I had tried to escape. As the shadows thickened, a deep rumble echoed from within the confines of the darkness, splitting the floor beneath me. The ground cracked and split, spilling forth a roiling black mist that writhed like a living entity, crawling toward me with malevolent intent. Through the haze of shadows and despair, I saw something gleaming at the center of it, a reflection, perhaps salvation, or possibly something far more sinister. My heart raced, a fusion of panic and curiosity igniting within. "Get back!" I shrieked, scrambling away as the maelstrom of voices merged into a singularity of rage, a desperate fury that threatened to consume everything. But, as I staggered back, my foot found the crumbling floor's edge, plummeting backward. I felt the ground beneath me give way. A new pit formed, a void that shattered the very essence of reality itself. I tried to scream, but the cacophony around me drowned out my voice as I tumbled into nothingness. The darkness swallowed me, whispering tales of torment, each word seeping into my mind. and before I could grasp what lay ahead, I was falling into an abyss broken only by the faint glow of truths long buried, waiting to surface once more. I braced for impact, knowing the horrors below were far from over, and yet one horrifying question loomed in the void: what truths awaited in the depths? The plunge felt eternal, a haunting descent through layers of anguish and remorse, each heartbeat echoing like a war drum of dread. Shadows clung to me, whispering secrets I swore I had buried deep, but they were coming back with a vengeance, swirling into tangible shapes that flickered just out of my reach. Then, without warning, I collided with a floor far too solid for a void, gasping as the room around me spun back into focus. I lay in a dark corridor, the stench of decay invading my nostrils, a stifling aroma that made me gag. The walls seemed to breathe, exhaling stale air laden with desperation. To my left, flickering fluorescent lights cast a sickly green glow over what appeared to be a series of doors, each one closed yet pulsating as if holding something, or someone, captive within. I pushed myself up, my body trembling. I felt the weight of eyes upon me, unseen yet pervasive, lingering like a vengeful fog. "Please, no more, I can't take this," I whispered, not knowing whom I was pleading with. I in the far distance, I could hear a rhythmic thumping, like a heartbeat, punctuating the silence with a dangerous promise. It drew closer, growing louder, and each pulsation felt like it reverberated through my entire being, demanding my attention. I could taste the metallic tang of fear as I picked myself up and stumbled toward the nearest door. My fingers grazed the cold metal, hesitating, but in that moment, the door swung open on its own, revealing a sepulchral darkness within. My heart raced, caught between the urge to flee and the sick fascination drawing me in deeper. I peered inside, and glimpses of movement flickered like dying stars, a jumble of figures hunched over, their forms indistinct but undeniably human. "Help us," a voice wheezed from the dark, a thin whisper that cut through the terror like a shard of glass. "No, I can't," I protested, yet the pull was insistent. I felt myself stepping inside, propelled by a morbid concoction of dread and obligation. Shadows writhed at the corners of my vision, darting and flickering as if alive, and the figures became clearer, a cluster of gaunt faces, eyes sunken and expressions frozen in agony, mouths soundlessly screaming. My stomach churned as recognition surged through me. They were the faces from the photographs, the ones I had abandoned, their pain transformed into a tangible energy that encompassed me. "Why did you come back?" A voice emerged from the crowd, rising with a dreadful clarity. It was my own voice hissing through their lips, echoing my long-buried guilt back to me. "You are a coward. You have no place here, no," I screamed, stepping back as if physically struck. "Am not you." But the figures began to shift and morph, their forms twisting into grotesque mockeries of my own memories, a child's face, innocent yet twisted by impossible pain, lost friends, their eyes filled with betrayal. I felt myself collapsing under the weight of their silent judgment, the flickering lights seeming to sizzle and spark with their unspent fury, and then I saw the source of the heartbeat, a rhythmic thudding resonating from the far end of the corridor. It seemed to beckon me, a pulsing beacon amid the despair. I tore my gaze from the wretched souls, driven now by a primal instinct for self-preservation. I stumbled backward, feeling the oppressive air around me thicker than ever, clawing at my skin. As I turned toward the source of the sound, something unfathomable flickered in the shadows ahead. An enormous, pulsing mass coiled within itself, almost waiting for my arrival. It was less an entity and more an absencean emptiness that swallowed the light whole, while its very presence throbbed with malicious intent. The heartbeat quickened, sounding much like a chant, a dark allure that paralyzed my will, and amidst the pulse, words began to form, a chorus identifying itself. "Feed us, we hunger." The air dropped in temperature, frost creeping over the ground as I realized I was not alone. Tendrils of the shadow began to listlessly reach for me, fingers stretching, pulling away from the mass as if they craved my warmth. Desperation flooded my being as I sprinted into the abyss, the shadows darting after me. A storm of vengeful past sputtering toward my heart. I ran into the next room, slamming the door behind me, but it shattered upon impact, the shadowy figures flooding in as I pressed myself into the far wall. My breaths came in shallow gasps as realization dawned. The very shadows I thought I could outrun had already seeped into my essence, entwined with every anguished breath and every heartbreaking memory. "Stop!" I cried, my voice cracking under the sheer weight of terror binding me, scrutinizing their morose delight in my fear. 1,000 eyes glimmered in the dark, each one a cemetery of hopes forgotten, and among them, I sensed one gaze more powerful than the rest, and eyes into the soul stare that chilled me to the bone. "Choose," it whispered, the words wrapping around my conscience like a vice. The shadows heaved in a grotesque display, morphing into the faces of those I had lost, their mouths moving in unison, begging me for recognition, for acknowledgement of the choices that had sealed their fate. But it was a decision I couldn't bear to make calm confront. As the shadows descended, wrapping around me in a cold embrace, I finally understood the price of escape. Bright light erupted outside the door's threshold, an infernal glow shining from the unknown and illuminating me through the specters, but the shadows tethered me too tightly. One last terrible cry ripped through the corridor. "You will never be free." With a strangled sob, I pushed against the darkness, the room vibrating with an ominous hum. But the light flickered and dimmed a final pulse that faded into morose silence. My heart clenched, realizing I was never truly alone. Whispers crowded my ears, promising me nothing but torment, urging me to listen. That I hadn't simply returned, I had unleashed something far more sinister from within, and as the shadows enveloped me fully, I braced for whatever horror awaited, knowing I would have to face it all, while the echoes of the past prepared to take their final revenge. A moment of silence hung heavy, thick as fog, before the shadows lunged forward. My heart thudded madly, a caged beast caught between flight or fight, but there was nowhere to run. The figures surged around me, their forms melding into one another, while their collective hunger twisted into an infectious laughter that sent chills coursing through my veins. "Please," I whimpered, but the word to Dios fell flat in the monstrous rumble. It seemed to drown under the weight of their baying, that shared memory of despair and retribution. Then, just beyond the wall of gnashing shadows, a new sound broke through. It was the holler of a child, pure, innocent, and yet shredded by terror. "Help me, please." The sound sliced through the ambient shrieks of the shadows, freezing me in place. It felt impossible, yet as the voices around me twisted with more fervor, I turned toward the source. "No. No, don't listen to them," came my own voice, a desperate shout against the tide of terror. My instincts clamored, but my body was tethered to the horror that surrounded me. The shadows surged and quieted, momentarily distracted by the child's plea. It offered a fleeting reprieve, a moment of innocence amidst the encroaching darkness wrapping snugly around me. "Help!" echoed the plea again, faint but distinct, dribbling with the resurgence of hope. I knew that voice vividly. It belonged to Mia, my niece, lost and tormented. My heart tightened painfully. Paralyzed, I recalled the day she vanished, the frantic searching that turned into months of waiting, finding only more despair. How had she come to this place? How had my guilt drawn her back from the void? "Mia," I shouted, the name bursting from my lips like a lifeline as shadows recoiled, their laughter drowned by her cry. I fought through the writhing mass, pushing against teeth and gnashing spirits, driven by the single thread of connection that bound me to the innocent life I had failed to protect. With a flick of my hand through the tumult, I broke free to the edge of the darkness, my breath ragged but desperate. Just beyond the shadows lay another door, slightly ajar and illuminating sporadic swathes of blinding brightness from within. I lunged toward it, disbelief propelling me, my heart a war drum of determination, and feared, if I could reach her, if I could just embrace her, maybe I could stem the tide of despair that perpetually threatened to consume me. The shadows howled in protest, surging as I neared the light, their hands clawing, pulling at my flesh with icy intent. I glanced back once more, shadows creeping closer, their maw thickening, hungry to reclaim their darkness. "Stay back," I cried, using every ounce of strength to shove against fleeting tendrils that hissed and snarled. "She's mine." I crashed through the threshold, landing hard on a cool metallic surface, And just beyond that shining door unveiled a vibrant world, starkly different from the crushing night. The air hummed with warmth and laughter, filling every crevice with light. But something was amiss. The vibrant setting felt too vibrant, too polished. It pulsed with life, yet my heart sank. Everything around me felt unnaturally perfect, but hollow beneath the facade. "Mia," I shouted, scanning the phantom silhouettes that flitted in the brightness under soft trees abounding with ripe, red apples. Her laughter rang again, pure bliss reincarnated, making my skin crawl, thick with too much joy. I stumbled toward the sound, close enough to touch, but never quite reaching. With each step, the world shimmered, and every innocent face morphed from familiar to sinister. A baby playing beneath a swing became a hollow-eyed apparition, its lips curling into an eerie grin that betrayed its cursed existence. Just as despair began to take hold again, I saw Hera's small figure dancing in the sunlight, giggling as if chasing shadows away with her laughter. "Uncle," she shouted, her voice echoing like a distant chime, drawing me closer, inflating my hope with each heartbeat. "Mia?" I shouted, pain and longing spilling into my voice. I rushed toward her, ready to sweep her into my arms and away from the horrors tethering me to this cursed place. But when I reached her, my arms wrapped not around a child, but around air. The laughter ceased, replaced by a breathy specter that rippled through the trees before vanishing completely. The reality around me began to twist and warp, the polished surface fracturing as shadows spilled from the shattered edges like inky oil, swallowing the vibrant world whole. The laughter returned, now haunting and twisted, a cacophony of the souls trapped within thousands of children echoing in one voice. "Join us," they sang, drawn into this chant of despair and madness. "You'll never escape." A new horror bloomed as the ground ripped open beneath my feet, widening into an abyss that beckoned me in with promises of reunion. I fought to steady myself, panic coursing through my veins, but the shadows tugged at me, dragging me toward the edge of that dark chasm. "No," I screamed, gripping the ground with desperate intensity, but the pull was too strong. Whatever sacrifice I'd made to uncover the truth of my heart had only served to deepen the sadness that enveloped me. With a final surge of power, I looked into the abyss, into the eyes of those that waited. The emptiness grinned back at me. The price of their wicked hunger lay in the loss of all that I had held dear. The shadows beckoned, whispering promises of freedom and clarity entwined with loss and sorrow. As I felt the ground slide away beneath my fingers, I was forced to confront my ultimate truth. A flash of understanding pierced through the gathering dark. Me torment was not simply a result of the external shadows, but the darkness that dwelled within. An eruption of violence filled the air as a final plea descended on my weary heart. "I will not become like you," I cried, poised at the edge, but whispers curled around my throat, squeezing until all that was left was despair. Then the shadows surged one last time, and all fell into darkness as the earth devoured me whole. And in that moment of pure annihilation, a hand grasped mine, and our screams merged into one formidable scream that resonated through the void, shaking the very core of everything I had fought for or against. And then silence. I woke up on cold tiles, the sterile scent of antiseptic mingling nauseatingly with the heavy fog of confusion. Panic swept through me like a tidal wave. I sat up wildly, panic-stricken eyes racing around the spacious, stark hospital room, bathed in antiseptic white light, cold and lifeless. The machines beeped steadily, sounds of life juxtaposed against the eerie emptiness of my surroundings, my heart racing to a frantic rhythm that matched their blinking chorus. Just beyond the glass partition, I could see shadows moving, a flicker of movement darting here and there. But the faces were obscured, distant, ethereal. I struggled to recall how I had gotten here, the dark vortex swallowing me just moments before, now a memory blurred by the fog. My heart sank further as fragmented recollections flooded back, faces of despair, the haunting wails echoing like tolling bells in the recesses of my mind. Then, suddenly, a figure emerged from the murky shadows, stepping into the light, illuminating their features. It was her, Mia, my niece, with her golden curls and those wide, innocent eyes that flickered with an unsettling light. A ghostly pallor clung to her, but more unsettling was the serene smile that danced on her lips. "You came back," she said, her voice crisp like the autumn air I once remembered. "Mia, I thought I lost you," I exclaimed, reaching out for her, but my fingers grasped only empty air as she stepped backward, a wisp slipping through a crack in reality fading like a mirage. The heartbeats thumped in my ears, her silhouette slipping into shadow once more. "Uncle," she called from the edge of the twilight, intangible yet vivid. "You must remember what?" I shouted, my voice trembling, panic melding with confusion. As if directed by invisible strings, the world twisted around me. Ghostly images swirled through the room like restless spirits, their wails echoing the lost souls from the depths, pulling at the seams of my heart, reminding me of the lives I failed to save. I felt suffocated, each phantom face compelling me to reckon with my guilt, the fragmented pieces of lives lost because I chose to escape. Suddenly, the machinery around me screamed to life, the alarms blaring, a chaotic clamor of beeping and whirring. I fell back, struck by a wave of understanding. They were calling for me, beckoning me home amid the chaos, but not as the man I was. They needed me as the arbiter of their despair, the vessel for their lingering pain. My breath hitched in my throat. What would they ask of me? I wrestled with the agony of truth, unwilling to confront the reality weighing on my submerged conscience. "No, I can't, please," I begged, the shadows intensifying, revealing all that I had tried so desperately to bury. I saw their eyes reflecting my cowardice, my neglect, and as they filled the room, the machinery erupted in cacophonous symphony calling, begging for release. Suddenly, the obsidian air thickened with whispers, swirling like an ominous cyclone around me, and bleeding into my very essence. "You can't escape. You brought us here," they wailed in unison, their voices mingling in a harrowing aria, filling the air with an agonizing resonance that coiled around my heart. Their shadows surged toward me, expectant and hungry, as dark tendrils reached out, begging for recognition. "Let me go," I screamed, but as I looked down, I found not my own hands but ghostly fingers reaching back at me, contracting like vines around my wrists, binding me to them, to the echoes of my abandoned life. Then, in the flickering light of a dying bulb, a horrifying realization dawned. I had never left the airport, not really. Each act of escape, each desperate bid for freedom led me deeper into this cursed trap of despair. "This is a reflection of what I've done," I gasped, sweat drenching my brow as I struggled against the torment engulfing me, shock coursing through my veins. And then it clicked, a horrifying epiphany. All these souls, beloved and lost, were never truly gone. I had ventured beyond the threshold only to return. This place, this hospital, was their prison, a limbo, where the veil between life and death blurred. They were trapped within this maze of memories, between forgotten shadows and anguished cries. Suddenly the glass door shattered, plunging me once more into darkness, as a malevolent force pulled against my spirit, pulling it apart piece by piece, leaving me hollow, reaching into the corners of my mind where Mia lingered. "Let go," echoed the spirits. It wasn't just my past, they were intertwined with my very essence. "We are a part of you now." Desperation clawed at me as I slipped closer to the abyss, the blinding light now stretching further and farther away. "No, I must help you." But who could I free, and how? With that truth weighing heavy on my shoulders, I sunk deeper into the spiraling chaos of their cries. But on the precipice of surrender, I heard her voice once more, gentle yet insistent, echoing through the haze. "Uncle, do it together." Fragments shifted and twisted, illuminating a path bathed in light, a reflection of the love we once shared. With resolution igniting in the fragments of my soul, I cried out, "I accept you. All of you. Our pain, our love, our grief, I embrace it." In that instant, a blinding light exploded, annihilating the darkness surrounding me and showering the room in golden rays that broke through the murky sorrow and despair. Whispers morphed into jubilant cries of relief, and the tangible warmth enveloped me, cocooning my heart. One by one, their silhouettes pulled away, breaking from the shadows that had once anchored them down, and in their farewell, they transformed from torment to love and light, coalescing into the figure of a little girl, once more, her laughter spilling through the air, maternal and precious. Thank you, uncle. But as her luminous image faded, the shadows cast by my previous failures lingered. For I was not free only transformed, for I now carried the weight of their sorrow within me forevermore. A terror remained. I had saved them, but was now bound to the darkness that I had once feared. As I looked into the mirror of realistic reflection twisted by the past, one final whispered truth lingered, echoing in my mind like a malignant shadow. You will always return to us. And in that realization, a chilling finality settled deep in my bones, leaving me breathless in a world that still held its haunting grip.